Thank you, Kodo. And thank you for welcoming me here. It's truly an honor to be here with you all, to share what I know about practice of writing, engagement, and service, and to contribute in some small way to the deep well of practice that you're cultivating here in Upaya. And of course, thank you to Upaya for this, making Wednesday Dharma Talks available and accessible for YouTube channel, this Zoom, for everything that you do. And thank you, Roshi Joan, Halifax, for continuing to be a kick-ass teacher in words and action. Also, a special thank you to everyone who participated in last year's socially engaged Buddhism training that Upaya offered, and especially to my collegial group and our group leader, Kozan. And of course, thank you to my teacher and friend, Natalie Goldberg, for her teachings and for introducing me to Upaya many, many moons ago, maybe a decade ago or more. I was actually just with Natalie and a group of about 300 people. And we started today a winter writing intensive. And when I agreed to do this talk today, I thought that it would be simple to just shift from that container to this container. It's all the same. It's writing practice. It'll just flow. Well, I was wrong. It is hard to shift. But I'm here. And what's coming up now is a poem by a 15th century monk, Ikkyu, my favorite. And it goes like this. Sick of it, sick of all the names. I dedicate every pore to what's here. I dedicate every pore to what's here. This is true for writing. It's true for being engaged, being truly engaged, and to really serve. Dedicating every pore to what's here, moment by moment. And as Noah said, I mostly write fiction. And when I think of that poem by Ikkyu now, and I can easily apply it to engagement and service, but how do I apply it to my writing practice? Dedicating every pore to what I'm writing. I can see it as in fiction, following my mind, following the characters that I've created, being true to their characters, and following the development of the world that I'm creating. Dedicating every pore to what's here. So the title of this talk is Show, Don't Tell, how the practice of writing can teach us about engagement and service. Show, don't tell, excuse me, is one of the big rules in writing. And I think you all know what that means, but of course I can't assume. So I will show. I can tell you that I miss my homeland, the Philippines. Over and over, I can tell you, I miss the Philippines. Maybe you'll get it, or maybe not. I can also show you how I miss the Philippines. So off the cuff, starting where I am at. Right now, I'm in Brooklyn, New York. It's been windy here, and it's been raining. Rain always reminds me of my birthplace, Dagupan City, Pangasinan, in the northwest coast of the Philippines. Along Lingayen Beach, there are family businesses that debone milkfish. Often, they would miss a bone or two or three, and I would eat this fish with one or two or three bones left in it. And I can feel it now. I can feel them now. 3 tiny milkfish bones stuck in my throat, the back of my tongue. It's the body longing to speak its native tongue. Antoy ngaran mo, dakdakel, ugaw. That's showing that I miss my homeland. And by that title alone, that great writing maxim, show, don't tell. Can't we see how the practice of writing can really teach us about engagement and service? Show, don't tell. What is that idiom? I'm so bad with US idioms. Talk the talk. Is that it? Talk the talk, walk the walk. The same idea.
Walk your talk.
Walk your talk. Thank you. The same idea. Show, don't tell. So simple. A few weeks ago, I think there was a program here at Upaya about leadership in Buddhism. And this writing maxim, show, don't tell. Isn't it a great maxim for leadership as well? Show, model, lead by example. Show, don't tell. So please take one deep breath with me. After doing that quick, spontaneous talk story about my birthplace, the milkfish, the bones, longing to speak the language, I am feeling wide open and I'm quite vulnerable, which is the best place, I think, to start when facing or greeting the blank page, pen in hand, open and willing to be vulnerable. Which is also a good place to start when we engage and serve. Dropping the walls that we've built up around us, dropping preconceived ideas of how to fix the world or how the world should be. In my case, I tend to hold on to dialectical historical materialism and Marxist thoughts. So the practice for me is how to lightly hold these, to not grip them like hammer and sickle and try to carve a mountain as big as the Mount Everest into sculpture that fits the image of how I think the world should be. Not getting rid of them completely, but just holding them lightly. There are sirens going down my street right now. I hope you can still hear me. This is where I'm at. Of course, we have some kind of idea. We can be open and be willing to be vulnerable, yet have some kind of idea, of course. Justice, equality, liberation. It's more the how, the process. Just like how I have some kind of idea where this talk is going. What matters for my practice right now is the unfolding of this talk. Of course, I've gone off the script from the first minute. Not that I have a lot of scripted words here, but I did make a list of things that I wanted to share. And so far, I've covered none of the items on that list. We will get there somehow. Another good place to start when we greet the blank page is to begin where we are. We don't really have a choice. Where else can we begin but where we are? At the socially engaged Buddhist training that we did last year, part of the training was to have a service project or at least an idea for a service project by the end of the year. For most of the year, I was searching. Oh, I can start work with this group or that group, or maybe form a nonprofit, connect with that group, this group. It was already in June and I still had nothing. Then I helped Natalie at a couple of writing practice retreats at Madeline Island where's Madeline Island? In Wisconsin. And that's when it hit me. Start where you are. I'm a writer. Writing has been my practice. I've been meeting with writing groups and even co-founded a cultural group with 3 women I've been writing with since 2002. So it hit me. Start right there. Meet yourself where you're at and start there. Meet yourself where you're at and start there. As a collective, us right now, right here in the Zendo or the YouTube. And I'm sorry I can't see the YouTube. I'm not on it right now. Physically, we're in different places. And I assume that we're all here because we're interested in engaging, in serving, in continuing to learn how we can refine that, refine our discernment. So where are we in this space-time? It's Wednesday, the 30th of November. We're in the US. Some of us are, maybe some of you aren't. And here in the US, it's a week after Thanksgiving, a day to give thanks. And also a day of mourning for many Indigenous communities, because it's a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people and the theft of Native lands and erasure of Native cultures. In writing, we try to see things from different angles. There is not one right angle. There is not one right narrative. So yes, Thanksgiving, we give thanks. Also, a day of mourning for many Indigenous communities. Not one right narrative, not one right angle. We also find ourselves here in the US almost, a month after the midterm elections, and also after several mass shootings. And we find ourselves in a world with wars and conflicts. Ukraine, just to name one. The continuing violence in Israel and Palestine. Famine in Somalia. And of course, in the Philippines. Political activists, labor organizers, women's human rights activists are being targeted, harassed, disappeared. This is the world we find ourselves in. Then we look at the world at a different angle. And we see that there are brave women in Iran standing up for their rights. There are people working to build trauma-informed communities in Ukraine. There are people standing up. And that's part of the narrative. And there are joys as well, joyous moments. And we don't have to look far. This right here, this community is a joyous moment. Tomorrow, I think we start our Rohatsu Sesshin, another opportunity to build community. Earlier this month, there was, I think, what was it called? The Global Joy Summit. Yes, the Global Joy Summit with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and many others. And there they said, the core of our being as humans, there is joy. And of course, here in Upaya, there was another moment of joy, a celebration in October at the end of the full practice period. Kodo and Kozan received Dharma transmission from Roshi Joan. That is a joyous moment. The continuation of lineage. seeing the commitment and dedication of two people. And it reminds me of writing and reading, how it truly is a kind of lineage. That there is a kind of mind-to-mind transmission happening. For me, it's been a lot of Latin American writers, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Mario Vargas Llosa. I've read all their books, mind-to-mind transmission. But what I haven't read a lot of are writers from the Philippines. Not that they don't exist, there are out there. But somehow they haven't resonated with me. And maybe there is some thinking there that I need to examine. Why am I resisting writers from the Philippines? Let's see. Where am I going with this? What does all this have to do with writing, practice, engagement, and service? I think first, realizing that there are many angles, many ways of seeing things. All influenced by our experience, our lived experience. In writing, we love to juxtapose seemingly opposite things because it makes the writing alive and fresh. And it wakes us up. We see the contrast, the light, the dark, the colors. It's nuanced. Just like in our engagement and service, it's important we don't just see the injustice, the suffering. It's important that we see and celebrate the joy of building communities together. And what is this thing? Writing and mind-to-mind transmission. There's a communion between writer, reader, listener. A community is formed. Many people will disagree with me about this, but I think writing is a communal act. There's a communion between writer, reader, listener. The question, I think, for our engagement and service is, what are we transmitting? Whether we're aware of it or not, in our relationships and engagements with people, we are transmitting something. And in writing, we talk a lot about narratives. Narratives. So when we talk about narratives and we talk about mind-to-mind transmission, What narrative are we transmitting? I gave a little list of the things that's been happening in this world, the wars, the gun violence, the horrible administration in the Philippines. But are we transmitting just this narrative, a dire kind of hopelessness? Or are we transmitting the narrative of the joy of building together? Narrative building is a powerful tool, and you know this. We've seen it with the past president, and we've seen it with Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The family completely switched or completely shifted, rebranded, the advertisement term, rebranded the narrative. They said there was no martial law during Ferdinand Marcos Sr.'s presidency. There was no martial law, they said, and there was no dictatorship. And they did all this through social media. They said the years that Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was in power were the golden years of the Philippines. And they built this narrative. And of course, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. won. There he is now, the president of the Philippines. As an Indigenous brown person, this idea of narrative building is so important. There's a process of decolonizing that needs to happen, especially when the language I write in is English. The language of the colonizer. Also, the references I have, the metaphors and the similes that I use, all kind of Americanized, westernized, Hollywood. Even the syntax of the language. We're often taught, writers are often taught that an active sentence is better than a passive sentence. An active sentence is, I read the book. That's active. A passive sentence is, the book was read by me. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a different relationship. At least I can feel it. There's a different relationship in an active and passive sentences, a different relationship between subject and object. The object becomes subject, the subject becomes object. But I'm taught to always write in active sentences, even though in my native tongue, it's mostly what we call a passive sentence. And if language informs the way I see the world or the way I engage in this world, then what am I missing? By not knowing fully the syntax or the language that is native to my body. So for me, and a lot of people of color out there, the process of decolonizing must happen in our writing, in the way we engage, in the way we serve. And it's an ongoing daily process. So back to this narrative building. What narrative are we building and transmitting? Or what Roshi Joan called, I think she called it, what is our cultural legacy? Because no matter what we think, whether we like it or not, we are taking part in some kind of narrative, helping create some kind of cultural legacy. Of course, this narrative building or deconstructing, reconstructing, we need to hold it lightly and let it be fluid. Otherwise, we get stuck. We get stuck, and then we're not open. We'll refuse to be vulnerable. And then the unfolding doesn't happen, and we try to control it. And before we know it, we're doing the very things that we intended to change. I also want to say that this narrative building, which is one of the things that I really, that I learned from writing practice, this narrative building or storytelling, or the building of cultural legacy, it doesn't just happen, of course, through writing, because writing, reading is not available to everyone. So when I'm talking about narrative building, yes, writing, because that's what I do, but I also want to include other forms. Maybe it's movement, some kind of theater art, performance art, oral history, oral storytelling. Ooh, this talk right here, oral storytelling. And the last thing I think I want to talk about, and probably the most important thing I've learned through writing practice, is, for a lack of a better word, agency. I wish I had a better word than that, but for now, let's use agency. You know, we're all inevitably engaged in something. We're all inevitably serving something. The question is, what are we engaging in and what are we serving? As a writer, I know and I've experienced that I have the agency to create worlds, word by word. I can make alive an imagined world. And by agency, I don't mean control. As a matter of fact, it's no control. I think by agency, I mean taking responsibility for where I am and start word by word and make alive this imagined world, an imagined world. In fact, in writing practice, we want to lose control. So in this agency, maybe we ought to lose control. Instead, take responsibility for where I am and start word by word and make alive this imagined world that I want to see. We can all show up, take responsibility in big or small ways to make alive that radically imagined world where we can see justice, feel justice, liberation, equality. Narrative building, holding it lightly, letting it be fluid, and agency, taking responsibility for where we are, step by step, moment by moment, word by word. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorotea. The energy of your talk and the invitation to examine our narratives and drop deeply into the exploration of how our language informs that, I think is the perfect segue into what you mentioned. That Rohatsu Sesshin is beginning tomorrow night. And so that'll be the perfect time for us to explore many of the things you were talking about in deep meditation. And for those of you who are in your busy lives, we invite you to join us. The residents and Roshi Joan and Sensei Kaz, Sensei Shinzan, Sensei Kozan will all be there holding the space. And so please join us for however much you wish in the morning or the evening. Join us for the talks at 11:15 Mountain Time, where the lectures will explore Green Dharma and the Avatamsaka Sutra. Dorotea, thank you so much for your beautiful talk. And we'll end with the floor. Four vows.